By today's standards, Franz Liszt would be considered the first real rock star, the Michael Jackson of his time. He cultivated celebrity, yes, but he took it seriously and used it as a platform to convey deeper notions about the role of artists in the world. He believed that great artists, those whom their creator had blessed with genius, were a noble breed, and like their aristocratic counterparts, had obligations, or what he called génie oblige, the obligation to serve something larger than themselves. When Liszt walked out on the concert stage bearing his medals and the Hungarian Sword of Honor, he thought of himself in ministerial terms, an artist with a mission. Franz Liszt was changing what it meant to be an artist in the post-Napoleonic world. During his world tours, he had single-handedly created the public audience, a public willing to pay to hear and, more importantly for him, see a concert. Public comments said it all.
When formerly I heard of the fainting spells which broke out in Germany, and especially in Berlin when Liszt showed himself there, I shrugged my shoulders and said, "This is Listomania."
Suddenly, there was a commotion in the hall. We all turned around and saw Liszt. He was wearing a white cravat. Over it, the Order of the Golden Spur, which had just recently been given to him by the Pope.
Most startling of all was his enormous mane of fair hair. In those days, no one in Russia would have dared to wear his hair that way. It was strictly forbidden.
Just at that moment, Liszt, noting the time, walked down from the gallery, elbowed his way through the crowd, and moved quickly toward the stage. But instead of using the steps, he leaped onto the stage.
He tore off his white gloves and tossed them onto the floor under the piano. He seated himself at the piano. Instantly, the hall became deadly silent. Without any preliminaries, Liszt began to play the opening cello phrase of the William Tell Overture.
As soon as he had finished, and while the hall was rocking with applause, he moved swiftly to a second piano facing in the opposite direction. Throughout the concert, he used the pianos alternately for each piece, facing first one and then the other half of the hall.
We had never in our lives heard anything like this. We had never been in the presence of such a brilliant, passionate, demonic temperament. At one moment rushing like a whirlwind, at another pouring forth cascades of tender beauty and grace. Liszt's playing was absolutely overwhelming.
On a very cold February night in 1847, Liszt stepped onto a stage in Kiev and performed what would be one of the last concerts that he would ever give in public again for money. He was 36 years old and was weary. For 10 years, he had traipsed across Europe and Russia by horseback, carriage, and even dog sled to achieve the dreams of his father. He had amassed a fortune that was held and invested by the House of Rothschild in Paris for the benefit of his mother and his 3 children. Unlike many lesser prodigies who soon vanished from sight, he had become the most famous musician in the world. Now, at the height of his powers, he walks away. Why? He wanted more, a bigger palette on which to project a broader musical vision.
In the audience that night in Kiev was one Princess Caroline von Sayn-Wittgenstein, sole heir to a wealthy landowner from the Polish Ukraine. Like Marie Dagout, Caroline was the unhappy pawn in an arranged marriage and presently living estranged from her husband. Both Franz and Caroline were at the height of their fortunes, but each in different ways was looking for greater meaning in their lives.
Their meeting that night changed the life paths for both of them and began a relationship that would last for 4 decades.
Ever since his successes in Germany, Liszt had been wooed by the Grand Duke of Weimar to take the permanent position of Kapellmeister Extraordinaire. In fact, the Grand Duke had gone so far as to appoint Franz Liszt Kapellmeister extraordinaire in 1842. Karl Alexander spent the next 7 years trying to get Liszt to show up. On August 31st, 1846, he writes to Liszt in Spain.
I hope that you will not be annoyed with me if I disturb for a moment in the middle of your activities. I am picking up the pen and ask how it goes. Do not bear a grudge if I slip Weimar's name into your plans.
Hearing no word, a month later, the Grand Duke writes again to Liszt, this time in Portugal.
I have heard nothing from you. Herr Grunwald spoke to me of your concerts in Vienna last season. He told me that you were working a lot. So, I regret not hearing from you about the task that I wish to impose on you, namely, building up the musical fortunes of Weimar.
Still not a word. There was no sign that Liszt was interested in coming to Weimar.
Although I do not know where you are, and I have not heard from you in a long time, I could not forego the pleasure of writing to you. I am writing to ask you to hasten your return to Weimar. God willing, it would crown your achievements if you brought the reply yourself.
When commanding him to appear didn't work, Karl Alexander tried a kinder and gentler approach a few weeks later.
I am longing to see you again. You are esteemed, loved, and understood among us in Weimar.
Finally, Liszt does reply in late 1846 in his now familiar florid style.
I enjoy thinking first of Weimar, my fixed star. Its beneficent rays of light shine down on the long journeys of my life. I will always dare to say that it will become my desire to humbly link my efforts to Weimar's glorious traditions.
Learning of Liszt's very successful concerts in Constantinople, the Grand Duke later writes,
We can offer you uninterrupted time for music making. Concerts in the Sultan's harem, however, we cannot match.
Unknown to the Grand Duke, time and maturity had worked in his favor. By the conclusion of the Kiev concerts, Liszt was exhausted, but he was also in love. After a few short months of courtship, he, Caroline, and her young daughter Marie would make Weimar their home. The court of Weimar was not wealthy. Indeed, the moving force behind cultural and political affairs was Karl Alexander's mother, Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna, the sister of Tsar Nicholas I of Russia.
But how does the most famous man in Europe find solitude, even in the small provincial principality of Weimar? No sooner had he and his married mistress settled in Protestant Weimar in 1848 than musicians from all over the world trailed in his wake to this Thuringian city of 5,000. Within the first year, one especially destitute and desperate composer fell through the door. 35-year-old Richard Wagner fled to Weimar seeking the protection of Franz Liszt. He had been director of the Dresden Opera House, but he had also involved himself in the Dresden insurrections, for which many of his cohorts had been executed. A warrant had been issued for his arrest, and thus began the 30-year relationship between the most famous artist in the world and the most difficult man in the world. Despite the true affection each held for the other's accomplishments, a sampling of the over 300 letters between them tells us how this relationship began disastrously and only got worse.
You told me lately that you had closed your piano for some time, and I presume that for the present you have turned banker. I am in a bad state and cannot hold out for another week. 5,000 thalers, can you get me such a sum? Have you got it yourself, or is there someone else who would pay it for the love of you? Your most devoted, Richard Wagner.
Dear friend, in answer to your letter, I have remitted 100 thalers to your wife at Dresden.
Dear Liszt, With the confidence of one entirely helpless, I further ask, make it possible for me to have some money soon. Have I spoken plainly enough?
My purse is completely dry at this moment, and you are aware that the fortunes of the princess has been for a year without an administrator, may be confiscated any day.
My dear Liszt, are you in good temper? Probably not, as you are just opening a letter from your plaguing spirit. I live at present only on the remainder of the money which I received from you. I implore you by all that is dear to you to raise and collect as much as you possibly can.
My most esteemed friend, Richard, before thinking of myself, I must provide for the comfortable existence of my mother and my dear children in Paris. My concert career, as you know, has been closed for more than 2 years past, and I cannot resume it imprudently without serious damage to my present position and still more to my future.
Franz, I have an inspired idea. You must get an Erard piano for me. Write to the widow, tell her 100,000 fibs, and make her believe that it is a point of honor for her that an Erard should stand in my house. Your most devoted friend and true admirer, Richard Wagner.
Needless to say, Liszt never connived to get Wagner a free piano. But history does record the lengths to which Wagner went to beg and blackmail Franz Liszt for money. Their tortured relationship lasted for more than 3 decades and reveal how Liszt handled controversy throughout his life. Even when Wagner seduced Liszt's married daughter, Cosima, from her husband and 3 children, Franz Liszt remained an admirer and champion of the composer, but not the man.
Wagner was an outspoken and rabid anti-Semite. Liszt was not. In fact, Liszt had cordial relations with the Jewish community wherever he lived, and was even invited to perform at the opening ceremonies of the Great Synagogue of Budapest, the largest in Europe, in 1860. Nevertheless, Liszt was often accused of being complicit in anti-Semitic views because of his close professional association with Wagner, the gifted bigot.
The most enduring and beautiful collaborations between the 2 men are Liszt's piano transcriptions taken from Wagner's operas. Until the establishment of the Wagner Festival at Bayreuth at the end of the century, these piano transcriptions by Liszt were better known than the operas themselves and remain mainstays of the piano repertory today. Here is the most famous of these transcriptions. From the last act of Tristan und Isolde, the beautiful and haunting Liebestod.
Liszt was a man of the world who corresponded with kings. It is remarkable that he continued to be supportive, almost docile in the face of Wagner's profound arrogance. But make no mistake, Liszt was no pushover. Once when Liszt was giving a recital in St. Petersburg, Tsar Nicholas arrived late and started talking to his aides during the music. Liszt paused. When the monarch inquired about the silence, Liszt replied,
Music herself should be quiet when Nicholas speaks.
Oblivious to the rebuke, Nicholas asked Liszt to perform a recital to commemorate the Russian defeat of the French army at the Battle of Borodino. Liszt coolly replied,
I owe my education and my celebrity to France. It is impossible for me to make common cause with her adversaries.
The Tsar snorted. The long hair and political opinions of this man displease me.
I let my hair grow in Paris, and I shall only cut it in Paris. And as for my political views, I have none, and shall have none until the day the Tsar deigns to put at my disposal 300,000 bayonets. No, this was not a man to suffer fools quietly. Well, maybe only the talented ones.
Franz Liszt was determined to reinvent himself in Weimar in two important ways. First, he takes up the baton to premiere symphonic works by a daring set of younger upstarts like Robert Schumann, Hector Berlioz, and the indefatigable Richard Wagner. In each case, what interested Liszt, the conductor, the most was the possibilities of the symphony as narrative, using the full dramatic range of the orchestra to tell an epic story. Prominent among his own compositions of the Weimar period are his 13 symphonic poems for orchestra.
His second achievement in Weimar was to refashion earlier piano works into more mature compositions. The Hungarian Rhapsody and the Année de Pèlerinage undergo massive updating and reconfiguration. Influenced by his admiration for Beethoven, he also begins to compose large-scale, multi-movement piano works reminiscent of the German master's complex late keyboard works.
Among these large-scale works are the Fantasy and Fugue on a Theme by Bach,
the strangely demonic Scherzo and March,
the 30-minute-long Adnos Fantasy and Fugue, based on a melody from Meyerbeer's opera, The Prophets,
and the signature long-form piano work from this period, the innovative B minor sonata. Five repeated notes, then a turn. Five repeated notes, then a turn. This idea, this motive, this simple nugget of an idea is just about all the music material there is to drive the entire 27 minutes of the B minor sonata.
Like his idol Beethoven, Liszt employs the slightest bits of an idea to build an entire sonata.
Just five repeated notes and then a turn. This figure is given a multitude of settings during the B minor sonata. He called this thematic transformation.
Unlike his idol Beethoven, Franz Liszt would only write one piano sonata, but boy, what a masterpiece.
But the B minor sonata was not well received by all of Liszt's fellow musicians. Like scores of other young composers, 20-year-old Johannes Brahms trekked to Weimar to meet the legendary Franz Liszt. When young Johannes was too shy to play his own works for the master, Liszt gathered up the unpublished Brahms score from the table and sight-read it to perfection. What happened in the next half hour changed the course of history and their relationship.
Liszt decided to favor his guest by then playing his own B minor sonata in its entirety. About halfway through the 27-minute work, Liszt glanced over at his young listener only to observe that Brahms had fallen sound asleep. The master ceased playing midstream and left the room. History proves that Johannes Brahms remained asleep to Liszt's music for the next half-century.
Franz Liszt also admired Robert Schumann as a composer and conducted the premiere of Robert Schumann's symphonies at Weimar. Indeed, Liszt dedicated the B minor sonata to Robert Schumann in gracious reply for Schumann dedicating his great C major fantasy to Liszt 2 decades earlier. But this apparent reciprocal gratitude did not prevent the Schumanns from severely criticizing Liszt's B minor sonata without a hearing. An entry in Clara Schumann's diary dated May the 25th, 1854 says it all.
Liszt's sonata is merely blind noise. No healthy ideas anywhere, everything confused. One cannot find a single clear harmonic progression. And yet I must thank him for it. It is really too awful.
1859 brought the beginning of many crushing developments for Liszt. His chief benefactor, Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna, dies early in the year. With her went the resources to keep the court orchestra going in Weimar. For 10 years, she had also interceded unsuccessfully with her brother, Tsar Nicholas I of Russia, to grant Princess Caroline an annulment so that she might marry her celebrity musical lover. But Nicholas had so far refused to help in this cause, influenced perhaps by the low opinion he had acquired of the virtuoso some years earlier.
His children were now young adults and finding their own way in the world. He had maintained a deep but distant affection for Cosima, Blandine, and Daniel. His support had been chiefly financial, while his loving mother Anna was kept in charge of their upbringing in Paris. Now his only son Daniel, a brilliant law student, dies in Berlin at age 19. Blandine, happily married to Émile Olivier, a future Prime Minister of France, was to die following childbirth a few years later. His surviving child, Cosima, the one he called his terrible daughter, would alone enjoy the affection of his later years. Theirs was to be a turbulent and complicated relationship, as Cosima devotes her life to the demands of being first Wagner's mistress, then wife, then widow, then caretaker of the Wagner legend at the fledgling opera festival at Bayreuth. The post in Weimar comes to an end, and Liszt and Caroline begin an even more difficult pilgrimage.
Still intent on marrying, they go to Rome to directly petition Pope Pius IX to grant Caroline's annulment. If Liszt thought that the machinations of the French salons were intense, he was in for the surprise of his life once inside the palace intrigues at the Vatican. As the most famous artist in the world and a devout Catholic, Franz Liszt was on a first-name basis with Pius, who called Liszt my Palestrina. But their friendship could not overcome the many voices within the Vatican that wished to thwart this marriage. Caroline's cousins and in-laws still lay claim to her vast fortunes. They feared that her marriage to Franz would put her wealth beyond their grasp.
Liszt and Caroline's 13-year effort to seek an annulment came to a head on January 7, 1861, when the Pope ratified the contested decision of the Holy Congregation of the Council to grant Caroline von Sayn-Wittgenstein an annulment. While legal petitions to block the marriage continued to swirl all over Europe, they chose October 22nd of that year for the wedding date, Liszt's 50th birthday. Flowers were ordered, prenuptial communion was celebrated the night before, the matrimonial contract was written and posted as required. All was in the ready. However, the forces of church and man were arrayed against them. Caving into months of petitions from his cardinals, the Pope reversed himself on October 21st. At midnight on the eve of the planned wedding, the Vatican sent Caroline and Franz a letter denying the annulment.
Neither Franz nor Caroline chose to contest this final blow. They were exhausted. They submitted to the will of the Catholic Church.
Caroline and Franz would never live together again, but remained in Rome as trusted friends to the end. She continued to serve as executor of his estate and co-author on several of his literary publications. Set adrift once again, at age 50, Franz Liszt would now begin yet another pèlerinage through the final episode of his life and career, this time alone. His hair had turned white, but he was still the most famous and sought-after artist of his time. All his thoughts and letters from this point onward contemplate his legacy and eternal matters.
My dear Caroline, the death of Rossini reminds me of my own. I wish and urgently command that my burial take place without show, be as simple and economical as possible. I protest against a burial such as Rossini's, and even against any sort of invitation for friends and acquaintances to assemble. Let there be no pomp, no music, no superfluous illuminations, or any kind of oration. Let my body be buried not in a church, but in some simple cemetery, and let it not be removed from that grave to another.
The contradictions of his personality became even more apparent in Rome. Eventually, he settles into a 10 by 15-foot cell in the monastery Madonna del Rosario, just outside the city. This austere, dilapidated, whitewashed room on the ground floor of the monastery would be his home for the next 5 years. In it, he had all that he needed: a wooden bed, a table on which to write, religious books for study, and a small piano with a missing D. Here he would write, compose, meditate, and prepare himself for the final chapter of his life.
Yet, even while Liszt was cloistered in the monastery atop Mount Mario, the outside world found his humble door. Just 2 weeks after entering the monastery, his friend, Pope Pius IX, came to Madonna del Rosario to see the celebrated artist. The Pope sang Italian arias, while Liszt accompanied the tuneful pontiff on the piano with the missing D. A few days later, Liszt descended from Mount Mario to perform a private concert in the Vatican for the Pope and his retinue.
Caroline was furious that Liszt kept company with the Pope. She was particularly peeved that he befriended Cardinal Gustav Hohenlohe, the very man who had schemed behind the scenes to thwart their marriage. What was Liszt up to? Was he reinventing himself at her expense? Friends wondered aloud if he had lost his mind.
My life is simplifying itself, and the Catholic piety of my childhood has become a regular and also a regulating experience.
He seemed unable to unburden himself.
A great affliction has occurred in my life.
Gustav Hohenlohe and Franz Liszt were cultivating each other. It was Hohenlohe who, on April 25, 1865, performed the ceremony where Liszt was made an abbé of the Catholic Church. Taking the 4 minor orders of the priesthood fulfilled Liszt's lifelong interest in the Church. From then on, he was known as Abbé Liszt. He was not allowed to celebrate Mass or hear confession. He took no vows of celibacy and was able to retract at any time.
I do not in the least intend to become a monk. It is enough for me to belong to the hierarchy of the Church to such a degree as the minor orders allow me to do.
Both men had gotten what they wanted. Liszt had finally entered the ecclesiastical stake that had called to him his entire life. Hohenlohe had provided the Holy Roman Catholic Church with a world-famous celebrity ornament. Caroline was to sequester herself for the rest of her life in an apartment not far from the church of their thwarted marriage. There she smoked strong cigars, and wrote dozens of treatises on the foibles of the Catholic Church while she waited for Liszt to visit her. Liszt always seemed to keep two Roman residencies simultaneously, an urban apartment where he socialized and taught piano students, and a quiet religious retreat typically removed from the hubbub of the city where he could meditate and compose.
Villa d'Este, Cardinal Hohenlohe's palatial villa on the outskirts of Rome. This 15th century retreat with its magnificent fountains, cascades, and pools inspired water play architecture all over Europe and beyond. To Liszt, Villa d'Este was not just a natural wonderland, but evidence of the genius of man could harness and engage with the forces of nature in the service of beauty and elegance. At the invitation of Cardinal Hohenlohe, this was to be the spiritual retreat for Abbé Franz Liszt until his death in 1886. He came and went as he pleased, traveling from the mountaintop retreat to the city to visit Caroline, teach piano masterclasses, and meet with the Pope. Here, inspired by the nexus of man and nature, he wrote some of his most impressionistic piano works. A generation before Ravel and Debussy were to make the term impressionistic music an international phenomenon. Here is Liszt's reflection on the scene. His 1883 composition, Les Jeux d'eau à la Villa d'Este, The Fountains of Villa d'Este.
In the last 2 decades of his life, Liszt settled into a new nomadic routine. Wearing his abbe's cassock everywhere, he began to live part of each year in 3 cities, Budapest, Weimar, and Rome. He came to embrace the wonders of train travel and know all the schedules, often traveling 3rd class, composing through the night as soot and ash billowed through the train car. In Budapest, the city fathers sought to woo back their favorite son. They built a new conservatory of music and invited Liszt to be its director. In Weimar, he renewed his friendship with Karl Alexander and held world-famous masterclasses for piano students from all over the globe. These 2 cities represent professional obligations that he was willing to pursue. Rome, on the other hand, was for him his spiritual retreat. But even there he had famous visitors: Edvard Grieg, Claude Debussy, Alexander Borodin, Edward MacDowell, Anton Bruckner, and others came to meet the legend, Abbe Franz Liszt.
But age and celebrity finally began to take their toll. When critics reviled his music, he advised his students not to endanger their careers by programming his compositions.
With the rise in nationalism, Hungarians were looking to establish a strong national identity. Many had not forgotten the scandal of his 1859 book on gypsy music in Hungary. They felt Liszt was too German or too French. In Hungary, Abbe Franz Liszt was simply not Hungarian enough.
His close association with the music of Richard Wagner drew charges that he, too, was anti-Semitic.
The concert audience that he helped to create now turned against him and his more daring late works.
The impressionistic piano pieces like Le Jeu d'eau à la Villa d'Este drew sharp criticism from the academic music community he helped to establish.
His physical condition began to deteriorate. He had a bad fall and his eyes grew weak. But he continued to travel between the 3 cities he now called home. At times, his legs were so swollen that his students had to lift him from the train in Weimar.
My sight is going, dear friend, and I can no longer write without difficulty.
His drinking increased. Brandy and now absinthe became his daily companions, increasing his dark moods.
Everyone is against me. Catholics because they find my church music profane, Protestants because to them my music is too Catholic, Freemasons because they think my music is clerical. To conservatives, I am a revolutionary. To the futurists, I am an old Jacobin. To by right, I am not a composer but a publicity agent. The Germans reject my music as French, the French as German. To the Austrians, I write gypsy music. To the Hungarians, foreign music. And the Jews loathe me, my music, and myself for no reason at all.
Through his bitter depression, he continued to work on a new book, Sketches for a Harmony of the Future. In it, Liszt describes the final goal of the evolution in music to be the achievement of a state of omnitonic. Every note is its own tonic, something akin to the 12-tone theory that would be fully postulated by Arnold Schoenberg a generation later. That this man who studied with Salieri and Czerny would conceive of a musical language without tonality is revolutionary indeed, as radical as conceiving a world without gravity. He wrote to Caroline in 1883 that he was prepared to hurl my lance into the boundless realms of the future. There is no better example of what Liszt had on his mind than his penultimate composition, Bagatelle sans tonalité, Bagatelle without tonality.
These are the faces of Franz Liszt. This is the music of Franz Liszt. Pianist, composer, father, friend, entrepreneur, conductor, author, benefactor, biographer, Kapellmeister, abbé, lover. Franz Liszt, a man of 3 centuries. He was a study in contradiction. He is for us today a very 20th century figure, presenting his ambiguities without apology, adopting an existential stance with regard to events and persons around him. He spent all of his time and energy being Franz Liszt. Perhaps Princess Caroline said it best.
Liszt had thrown his lance much further into the future. Several generations will pass before he is fully understood.
Let us begin that understanding in this year, the Franz Liszt bicentennial year. Happy birthday, Maestro.
We'd like to hear what you think. Send us an email at knowledge@uctv.tv. Visit us online at www.uctv.tv. Call our toll-free viewer response line at 888-828-1737 or drop us a line at this address. Tonight on UCTV.
You don't.
You're watching Channel 27, the Brisbane channel. You're watching Channel 27, the Brisbane Channel. You're watching Channel 27, the Brisbane channel.
This is the regular meeting of the Brisbane Planning Commission, Thursday, July 25th, 2013. Call to order.
Commissioner Cunningham?
Present.
Commissioner Doe?
Present.
Commissioner Manier?
Here.
Commissioner Parker?
Here.
The record reflect Commissioner Reinhardt is absent.
And now we're moving to adoption of the agenda. Would anyone like to
adopt the agenda of the
tonight?
control part.
I second the motion. All in favor? Aye. All right, and we're moving to the approval of the draft action minutes of April 11th, 2013, regular meeting.
There was a little typo also here, but it's not relevant. This should be a approval of draft action minutes, not action of minutes. So there's an extra off there.
What about the action minutes? Are we approving those?
I move to approve the draft action minutes of April 11, 2000.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Now we're moving to oral communications. Is there anyone who would like to speak tonight? Well,
That's not on the agenda.
what?
On something not on the agenda.
On something not on the agenda, excuse me. Well, I see no one, so I'm going to close the oral communications. And we have no written communications unless we're talking about this. No. So I guess we are going to move to item G, new business. And this is for public hearing, 108 Old County Road Use Permit UP 313. Proposal to establish a commercial gym educational facility for martial arts training totaling approximately 1,456 square feet on the second floor of the Brisbane Village Shopping Center. Applicant is March AKD, owner United Ings Limited Partnership Ltd, assessor's parcel number 005212110. Seth?
Yes, thank you. The applicant requests approval of a use permit for a commercial gym educational facility to conduct martial arts training in the Brisbane Village Shopping Center. The use would occupy approximately 900 square feet of training area and office space. A small part of that is office space, plus an equipment storage area. That is approximately 3% of the shopping center's leasable floor area. This use would be located on the second floor of the center. The facility would be used for martial arts training for both children and adults, and each class would include up to 15 students plus 2 instructors. The proposed times are Monday through Friday, 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. Additional classes may be offered on Saturdays. There are 2 required findings for a conditional use permit which this application meets. First, the Planning Commission shall give due regard to the nature and condition of adjacent uses and structures, and to general plan consistency. The use is consistent with the general plan's land use designation, and also includes, the general plan includes policies establish a mix of land uses that best serves the needs of the community and encourage a broad spectrum of Brisbane residents and businesses. It's consistent with both of these policies. The second finding is that the Commission shall determine whether or not the use would be detrimental to those residing, working in the neighborhood, to property or improvements in the neighborhood, or the general welfare of the city, which this application meets as well. In this case, the use would be beneficial for the shopping center as a whole to reduce the vacancy rate while providing a use that would serve the community. That is, it would provide a place to learn karate, and a place for fitness and personal development. The current and anticipated future uses in the shopping center are not anticipated to conflict with the gym. The gym's hours would be off of the peak hours for the shopping center. It would also provide a balance of uses for the shopping center. The municipal code does not specify a parking standard for this type of use, but the applicant has indicated up to 7 spaces might be necessary. This is a reasonable estimate and can readily be accommodated based on parking surveys provided in your staff report. Finally, the application was submitted to the various city departments. Fire department has requested a condition of approval to address the current fire codes for conversion of this space to this use. In closing, staff recommends conditional approval via adoption of Resolution UP 313.
Any questions for staff?
Not at this time.
I just had one question. I was wondering about the, did you talk with the owners of the mall about the sound that would come through with kids jumping around on the mat?
I have not talked directly with Judy about that specific item. I know she has signed on to this application. I can grab it. I have it at my desk. They have planned to install tatami mats on the floor, which I expect would greatly reduce any sound impacts or
And the
vibration
tatami
impacts.
mats are,
It's about this thick. I'll go ahead and grab that and show that to you as we transition over to public comment. I'll go grab it.
okay.
Okay, and you may direct that question also to Judy during the public comment.
In your review, did you do any research to find out the noise generated by these kind of activities? You talk to any other gym operators or any other areas where there is such a facility, or through the literature, any data that you have?
I have not. You might ask the applicant if they have a feel for that.
Yeah, I think we should look at it too, as a staff, because it will be important because we are reviewing and approving the application. So. As far as the parking, I think there is no issue in terms of, because it's the hours, the recently approved project will not be in conflict.
Right.
Right. So are they going to have a dedicated space for them, or they just have assuming that they will have 7 spots, but are they going to be marked, or or is it a requirement or not?
Dedicated parking spots. There's no indication of any plans for that. I think for a shopping center such as this, I think it's best to keep the parking as rotational as needed, because certain hours of the day, the lunchtime when they're not there, those parking spaces I'm sure would be needed by other businesses.
Yes. The reason I'm asking because you specified 7 parking spaces. I was wondering whether there are 7 dedicated or the estimated.
And that's an estimate that the applicant gave, and I think that was kind of an upper end number. I think they expect a lot of the students would be local, would walk or carpool, parents dropping off, for a quick trip in and out. So I think that's essentially their peak time at the drop-off pickup times, essentially.
And also there's instructions for the pickups and all that was addressed to you as to how the kids will be picked up and what times, and they have to wait, or what.
That might be
you don't want
a good question for the applicant.
Because you don't want them to be running around again, just like the concern we had with the other application, because it's a moving traffic area. So. Okay. I don't have any other questions.
I have no questions.
All right. Thank you. And would the applicant like to come up and... Here, why don't you come up and introduce yourself? No, wait a minute. Why don't you come up and...
The flooring.
Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Mark. Mark D. I'm the future owner of the martial arts. I actually own Teriyaki House and House of Thai. And I also have an office upstairs, which is close to the dojo. So the concern of noise, I'm the majority of that area right now. So I guess one thing that I really have to look at is in regards to the noise. That's why we actually have the mats here. But one condition that I actually approached Judy is if there's a tenant that's going to move downstairs, I'm actually going to move the dojo out of there. I know there's a big space in that corner, 10,000 square foot on the bottom there, below the martial arts.
Would you come up? Yeah.
So there's an empty space below it right now. So the closest space to it that's actually going to get affected would be our restaurant, Teriyaki House and House of Thai. And the closest office upstairs would be my office or my other company that I have. But really the goal of this business is actually for my son. So I'm trying to help him start a business. So in the same time, I have this retired Army guy, and I'm also a retired Air Force guy. So I figured doing some community service, not just having a business, but actually influencing youth Brisbane, and there are actually kids actually goes to the schools here. And, there's a lack of activities. I know that they have the community center going, but I think having something really permanent in Brisbane would definitely help out. And I think we also consider donating to the schools too. So for every student that applies to our school, we're actually donating $5 for each registered student. So there's a community service that we're actually doing, bringing back to the community. But in regards to the parking, we don't have a set space, but what I determined from the volume of students at 15, and I just made an assumption of 50% would actually park, guaranteed parking. The other 50 would probably carpool. That's why we came out with 7, but I think we're still kind of playing kind of high on that at 50%. So Judy, you have anything to add on?
Well, I guess when you were telling about upstairs, the 108.
Hey, Judy, can you move to the microphone? Thanks.
Sorry.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Judy, the property manager at the Brisbane Valley Shopping Center. When Mark and Joe first approached me, proposed this activity, want to open at the center, which I thought, it's a good idea. And because maybe about 2 years ago, there's another nonprofit, I guess it's the boxing, that was led by at least 2 or 3 of the residents in Brisbane, and they even came to talk to me and Charles about that. That time they were interested on the location where last month when we had the hearing for the church, have their service over there, okay, on that corner. And we said, okay, great, because it's for the majority the kids enrolled on that activity is from the city of Brisbane, residents. So, however, later on, they found somewhere else is better, and that is way out on where the Baylands on the other side. And and again, I said, well, okay, fine. But then, so when Mark and Joe approached me at this, I said, well, first of all, my concern, because I said, look, quarterly, I do receive, and I believe you all also receive not the monthly, the quarterly City of Brisbane that activities, and I saw what you have at the Missing Blue or by the library, right? There are some activity going on the weekend. So, and right away I pointed to them. I said, "You're going to have a competitions, okay? Unless that they agreed, Otherwise, when you come here and they during the public hearing, they could come here to oppose you. Okay, that's my concern. But it's a good activity after school for all the young people, so they could be learning to protect themselves, not to hurt someone else. And of course, it's kind of training for them to discipline themselves and not go out to get drunk or get drugs or fight for or go into some gangster clubs or something. So I thought it's very, very good idea for that. I said, but you have to work and talk to the people who has the lessons over there, and also maybe some other parents from the school and see they supporting you. So actually, these 2 gentlemen and Michael, the 3 of them, they did spend a lot of time doing some research and talking to different parents or for some adult that came to their restaurant for dinner or lunch. They did stop and talk to them, and I believe that you have a list of the sign off, the parents, that say, hey, we would like that idea and support it. Okay, and that's why finally, after so many months, they came back to see me and said, Judy, here. See, we did do our homework. Okay, it's not something, I'm trying to give them a hard time, but however, anyone who wants to start a small business like this is going through a lot of things. I want all the people no matter small or large or medium size of business, come to the center and they start working well. And that's how they do, right? And they will continue making our center better and have more tax and pay to the city. That's what, my mind thinking. It's not just because my center have a lot of vacancy. I do, have to screen what kind of activity or restaurant or any business, whether they're going around, as a team in my center. It's not anybody who want to come in, I will allow them. And I did pointed out one thing. I said, you were talking about upstairs. My concern is when you're teaching those youngsters, there will be noise. That's my second thing that I. Yeah, so that's why they said, we will find out something for you and prove it and let you know.
Hi, my name is Joe Moreno. I'm the senior instructor for the martial arts school. Well, my basic martial arts is 32 years I've been doing it. And we're a stand-up martial arts, so it's not a flipping judo where you slam or you're on the ground constantly. So the noise level is very low. Another part of your question about the traffic during the turnovers, we give a 15-minute interval gap. So every class, there's 15-minute time period for the parents to pick up their kids before the next class starts.
That's good.
And out of respect, I talked to the person who runs the Taekwondo class at the library, just to let him know that I was trying to open up a karate school, to let him know out of respect as a martial artist, and he was saying more power to me. So I got his approval from that time on too. That's the research we've been doing for the past couple of months. So we're just not sitting ducks out here. So we just wanted to let you know that the questions that you have is very simply solved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you ask some questions? Or
Yeah.
David, the question you want to ask?
I was going to ask about the safety issue in terms of the parking for the children when they do transition, because you have children as young as 4.5 years old, and so it's not a matter of, I think that it becomes incumbent upon the school to make sure that they're inside until they get picked up, or they're chauffeured in and out.
We won't allow the children to go outside of the school unless their parents come and get them. We won't let them go downstairs. We'll have someone supervise them to the bathroom if they have to be. So it's a give and take. We'll make sure that it's in all karate schools as well. They don't allow any children to go outside of the school.
Or to loiter or wander up and down because it gets to be
they
dangerous.
Have to stay inside the school.
Right.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I mean, not just this martial arts school, but in previous ones that I've worked at, it's not allowed. The parents have to be there to pick them up. We can't say, oh, my mom's meeting me outside. Well, mom has to come inside, and that's the biggest thing. Because the concern is that they can be, anything can happen once they step out the door.
Right.
And once they step out the door with their parent, then our liability is less.
And the child's safety is first.
Yes, very, very good.
Yeah, and I wanted to thank you for, you anticipated a question I had, which was, did you check with the rec department? Because we do have youth, and so thank you for that. And also thank you for contributing back to our schools. That's wonderful. Thank you. It makes a difference to the community. Thank you.
Any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, the question I had was regarding there's a jumping noise. The other one is when I used to the karate, my kids used to go to those. They do make a lot of noise, saw and all that stuff.
Yes.
Did you take that into consideration, whether that will cause any kind of
Well, I believe the mats muffle the sound a lot more.
because they yell, not only jumping, but yelling.
That's great. In the building, I would say it would be about 40% noise or further yelling, and it depends on what they're doing. If they're doing something, I like it nice and loud and fun for them, but it has to be to a minimum too. You got to hear instructors talking, and I want to make sure that they're paying attention. But if you have a lot of noise level, then they won't be able to pay attention. So we want to keep it out of balance.
Okay. The other question I had was regarding the equipment storage. What kind of equipment you will have on the site?
We'll have pads, we have punching bags, we have, gear for them to use, paddles. Everything's all foam and padding for their safety.
There's nothing that can endanger any.
Oh, no, not at all. Not yet. No, none. We're very traditional. It's a very traditional martial art, so it's not MMA type.
Yeah, there won't be any swords or anything.
Oh, no.
Okay. I think you covered pretty much all the ground, and I was very happy to see the long list here. One thing that caught my eye was it says no name, no email. Yes.
Yeah.
I was wondering. I said it gives me a good hint when I run for election any time. I can put number of those.
Well, they didn't want to give their name or email, but they just said, I agree.
That's good. So I don't have any other questions.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Good luck. Okay. Anyone else want to speak on this? Okay. At this time, we will close the public comment.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye. Okay. I think it's a very nice proposal, and I think some facilities that like this will really benefit the kids in our town. I think almost all small or big towns I've seen there is a lot of interest in this kind of training for the young kids. And the thing is that they also like to be part of the community. And their gesture is very clear that they want to support the school system also. They're not competing. And they're giving part of their proceeds to the school also, which is a good thing. So I'm pretty much happy with the proposal that they have. So I don't have any comment.
I just think it's great that we've got another new facility for our kids in this town. I really have very little to say except that I would welcome this business. A town they've already proved that they're great business in town for many years now. How many years? 18 years. Okay, so I'm okay with this.
So it's going to be a family business.
I think this is a great idea, and they've done so much legwork to prep and to really be inclusive and be very responsive to community needs. So I very much support it.
Okay, so would anyone like to make a motion to approve this application?
I will make that motion to approve the use of 108 County Road, use permit P313, and hope to welcome them here.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, congratulations. We're very excited, and we hope you have a wonderful time setting this up.
Best of luck.
Thanks for all the homework.
You need to read the appeal process. Yeah.
Okay. So if this is an appeals process, anyone who may appeal the action of the Planning Commission to the City Council not later than 10 calendar days for subdivision applications. That doesn't work. After the Commission's action, an application form and fee is required to make a formal appeal. For additional information, please contact the Community Development Department, 415-508-2120. Great.
Great.
So we're going to move on to item H, items initiated by the staff. Introduction of City Attorney David Kahn.
Again, I'm very pleased to welcome David to the city family and to the Planning Commission. I'll turn it over right to him and give a little background, and if you have any questions for him, it would be a great opportunity for you to get to know him a bit.
Chairperson and members of the commission, good evening. I'm David Kahn with the law firm of Rennie Sloan Holtzman Sakai in San Francisco, and I've had the privilege of working with the city of Brisbane for I think almost a month now as city attorney. I wanted to come and have the chance to meet you in person and just give you a little bit of background. I've been working with planning departments, planning commissions, in both large cities and small cities for about 27 years, and have seen a number of interesting issues come across the desk of the Planning Commission and my desk as well. In that time, I've developed an appreciation for how important the work of the Planning Commission is to cities. I think when you talk to citizens, there's nothing that's more important to them than the character of the community, the areas in which they live. And as the Planning Commission and planning commissioners, you of course have a great impact on the quality of life and on the character of the community. So your jobs are very, very important. I look forward to working with the city and with the Planning Commission on issues as they come forward, and I encourage you at any time that you have a question that may involve a legal issue to speak to the planning director, who will then convey it to me, and we'll be sure to get you answers as soon as we possibly can. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, welcome. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have questions regarding your experience with EIRs. Have you been involved in a number of projects that are going on in the Bay Area, including San Francisco? Have you worked in any of those in expediting or reviewing the EIR process?
I'm very familiar with the EIR process and with CEQA. I spent 5 years as a senior county counsel for Santa Clara County, working with their planning department in looking at CEQA issues. And then it's been a year now, but I spent 7 years as the city attorney for the city of Sunnyvale down the peninsula. And there were a large number of projects involving environmental review, EIRs, and various mitigation measures that came through the city. So I have worked very extensively with CEQA and with EIRs.
And you get a chance to look at the current EIR that's in circulation since you've been...
I'm in the process of looking at it. I think I'm on page 350. Only about 750 more to go.
Okay. And how about your experience in small, moderate, or large-size cities? Have you worked in all of these different sizes of the cities and local issues that are pertinent to those type of cities?
I have actually, in those 27 years, I've worked at cities that have been as small as about 25 or 26,000, and cities that have been as large as close to 1 million. So wide range of sizes and issues, both for large cities and for small cities.
This city is only 4,000, so...
Right.
So that's why I asked you the question, because there might be a whole set of different issues involved with the smaller cities, because sometimes the smaller cities, citizens are much more involved in the process because, and they want to keep the character of the city versus
Sure.
the bigger cities. So I just wanted to find out your experience in that field so that when we come across during the EIR process that we are looking forward, you will see that there will be a lot of interest from the locals. And that's where we will be looking at you to provide us some kind of a guidance as to how to handle those situations. And there are a lot of issues that may be, the Planning Commission has to make a decision. It may not be automatically just EIR, that's what it says, or this is what we should do. So those type of issues, we rely on your expertise, and that's why I'm asking those questions to see whether how much help we can get from you. So
Hopefully as much as you need.
And your last job was with the city of Sunnyvale, or what?
My last job with the public agency was with the City of Sunnyvale as the city attorney for the City of Sunnyvale. I've been with Rennie Sloan Holtzman Sakai for a little over a year now, and working with a number of different public agencies, including actually a number of fairly small cities as well.
And do you have any experience in working on the general plans of the various cities? And because this city, we also have the general plan and review, there is also a concern regarding the, its number of years that we have not updated that. And the whole system was waiting for this EIR for the Baylands to be completed. So that area also, there are a number of policies that we need to adopt into a code or into a ordinance. And that's another field that I like to see that how beneficial you will be in terms of the questions and concerns that citizens may have. Some of them may challenge some of those policies, and this city has a number of policies, even though we are 4,000 total, but we probably have more policies per person than a lot of big cities. So just be prepared for that. I think that you will enjoy it. At the same time, there might be a situation where we have to rely on your expertise to help us.
Okay, thanks for the advance notice on that. I'll watch for those.
So much.
Any other? David, I'm going to put you on the hot seat here. Have you dealt with brownfields and Superfund site issues before?
I have actually, in Washington, where I was for 12 years. I was involved with one of the cities I was working with as city attorney, was involved with a Superfund site, not on the property that the city actually owned, but involving a landfill where the city had transported its waste for a number of years. It became a Superfund site, and there were cleanup issues. So I'm familiar with Superfund issues, although it's not something that we see all that often. In Sunnyvale, I worked very closely actually with the Regional Water Quality Control Board and other regional boards, because on a very, very large site that was being developed for the downtown, actually it was the entire downtown redevelopment area, there was contamination from former dry cleaners from about 50 years ago that involved fairly substantial remediation and cleanup. It wasn't a Superfund site, but it did involve a lot of work with the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Okay, thanks very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you, and
Don't worry, we will have a lot of questions. Yes.
We're just warming up.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Are there any other items initiated by staff at this point? Great. All right. So items initiated by the commission, anyone?
I would just like to make a comment about feral cat issue, if I may.
Sure.
Would this be appropriate time? Over the last year or so, there's been issues that have been brought up to staff, not current staff that are present, about feral cat issues in Brisbane, and it's certainly an issue. And a volunteer group, which includes the Rose Kitty Rescue, Nine Lives Foundation, Humane Society, SPCA, several other cat rescue volunteer organizations. We've actually gotten together as an ad hoc group, and last Wednesday we actually spay-neutered 20 feral cats in Brisbane, 20 feral and stray cats in Brisbane. And from my perspective as one of the volunteers that was involved, I think everybody acted in an amazing manner, and it was 100% success. There were no issues. We do, however, still have a really big issue relative to feral cats, We can't blame the cats. It's the people who are the problem for dumping the cats in the first place that are not spay neutered, and then we have the perfect environment for cats to reproduce in this town and cause an issue, and they do. It's an issue for the cats because they get killed by raccoons and foxes and dogs and cats in cars and people who poison them, and people are actually poisoning cats in our town, which is very sad. It's an issue for the environment. Nobody wants cat poop in the backyard. It's an issue for the environment relative to the cats then being hungry and going out and hunting the birds and the lizards and the fauna on the mountain. So it's a big issue. I would really love to encourage everybody in town to be as responsible as possible. They're welcome to call me, and I have all the resources at hand to get all of these agencies involved to rescue these animals and make this situation go away. And I'm really sorry I didn't turn off my phone. Thank you. That was all I needed to say.
Okay, I have a question regarding the status of the Traffic and Safety Committee. Do you know whether it was formed and who are the members of that?
Actually, I do have that information in terms of the membership, and I apologize. I agreed to forward that to the commission, I believe. I will do that after this meeting or tomorrow. And I believe their first meeting was going to be scheduled in August. I don't have a precise date, but I can forward on the committee composition to all the commissioners for your input.
What are their goals to achieve that? Because one of the things that I was concerned about and I've been talking about is the hairpin turn at Humboldt Road, and I was told that that will be part of this discussion, and I want to see if they have any blueprint where they look at these number of projects, and are they being chartered to come up with some kind of a position, or if they need the federal funding or stuff like that, whether they're going to come up with recommendations so that at least we can see some movement in that area?
I'll look at, typically when the council creates a new subcommittee like this, they set forth what their charge is going to be, and so I'll find that staff report, council report, and forward it on to you as well. I know they're looking at things like, as you mentioned, traffic safety issues, design issues, safe routes to school, which again is a funding, there are funding sources available for that kind of pedestrian safety related programs. Some issues with, I believe, street parking in the public right-of-way, some of those kind of issues as well could potentially be on their plate. But I'll give you all the information as to their formation and their composition.
And also they should be made aware of the parking regulations that Planning Commission has approved in terms of what are the minimum parkings and where. Because what happens is a lot of people when they park on the street, they think that's their designated parking space, and that issue has to be at some point should be addressed.
Okay. I have a question about it as well. Do you know if there's a good representation for the different areas of town for the people who have applied?
I'd have to double check. I don't know if I had addresses I had names. I don't know if I had addresses, so I'll forward that on.
Okay.
That would all be part of the record.
And this is a group that if we find that there's a big area that there is no representation, that we could bring other people in? Is that encourage other people maybe to?
There are two things. One is obviously the council appointed as a certain size. I don't believe it's expandable in terms of the amount of members. So they did establish it as a fixed size committee, I believe. So
a fixed size.
Fixed size. It's not open to everybody necessarily. I don't know how many applicants they had. I'm not that familiar with that recruitment or that selection process, but it is a fixed number of members.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions you wanted to bring up, Mr.
I'm thinking there was one more thing I wanted to ask, but I can't remember right now.
It was about the general plan.
General plan, I already discussed that with, oh yeah, general plan update. I guess you're going to provide us that update sometime soon. And also the housing element, are we finished with that? Everything is done?
The answer to that is no. As we talked about, the council authorized the commission to look at some alternative sites to the Southwest Bayshore district that was designated. The city, we are actually making application for a charrette program through the Urban Land Institute, which would look at some of the sites in Crocker Park potentially, and the mixed-use site next to the shopping center. As kind of a kickoff, we would like to use that charrette process, which will make sure the commission is heavily involved in. I want your input as part of that process as well, and your involvement. We look at that as being kind of a stepping stone to really moving the dialogue on these new districts and the potential for some of the sites in Crocker Park for residential.
Is the charrette program going to be next year, or is it going to be sometime this year?
We'll have to work with the sponsor, the holder, which is Urban Land Institute. We were held up until we had budget clearance from the council. There's certain cost involved with that, and